Broken leadership methods may be holding your church back. We're talking about that today on the Church Revitalization Podcast.
Hello, and welcome to the Church Revitalization Podcast, brought to you by the Malphurs Group team, where each week we tackle important, actionable topics to help churches thrive. And now, here's your hosts, Scott Ball and AJ Matthew.
Welcome to the Church Revitalization Podcast. My name is Scott Ball, and I'm joined by my friend and co-host, AJ Matthew. AJ, welcome back to the United States. You've been keeping the air between over the Atlantic, like
Turbulent.
filling it with oh yeah, there you go. I was trying to think of a way to say that. I was to say you've been filling it with CO2. You are warming the globe, my friend.
Yes, in the private jet, the Malphurs Group private jet. Boy, that thing just spurs right along up there at 50,000.
That is a joke.
Yeah.
For anyone who's not catching on. No, in all seriousness, welcome back. Hey, before we dive into today's episode, I do want to, I mentioned this in the email that we sent out last week. I kind of teased this, and then today I wanted to share a little bit more just at the very top of the episode that we have something that we've never done before that we're starting the week of January 7th. And it is a leadership pipeline cohort. It's a 6-week process that is remote. It's an online cohort process where I take you through the leadership pipeline design process over the course of 6 weeks. By the end of that 6 weeks, a church is going to have a leadership pipeline for their church built. So there's hands-on workshop things that we're doing as a part of the cohort. I'm giving you all the tools and templates that you need so that you're not starting from scratch on any of this stuff. And then included in the cohort is also a year of coaching through 3 quarterly implementation coaching check-ins, which those are done one-on-one. So there's a cohort component where we're working 10 churches or fewer in a cohort, working on a leadership pipeline, followed by a year of coaching through these quarterly coaching check-ins. That those are one-on-one. And so if you've been interested in doing leadership pipeline at your church, but you don't feel like you could talk your church into bringing us in on site, and want something that's lower cost, but you're wanting to go into 2024 with a pipeline full of leaders and recruiting new volunteers and developing new leaders. If you're looking around at your church and going, hey, if my elder board or my church council, I don't have leaders ready to step up, I'm just going to be pulling warm bodies into that group because I don't really have qualified leaders. Or if you look at your current group of council folks and go, man, they're not really very good leaders. If you look around your church and you see, I don't see good leadership, then this is a process that's going to be, I think, really good for you. So I'm excited about it, AJ. It's a different format for Leadership Pipeline than we've ever done. I do want to say also, we a lot of the training content, any of the stuff that we've got that's pre-recorded, you'll have access to that forever. So if you have new leaders that come in or new staff that come on and you want to get them up to speed on all of this stuff, you will be able to give them access to that training content for forever. So I'm excited about that, AJ.
It's going to be
so
good.
People can go to malphursgroup.com/pipeline-cohort. And it's in the show notes. So if you go just wherever you're watching this, click on the little notes description, whether that's on YouTube or your podcasting app. And it's also in today's article, which is at malphursgroup.com/214. You can get the link and go there, and you can sign up now. It's live.
Early bird pricing.
Early bird price. Save 10% from now to sometime in November. I don't remember. I should know the date off the top of my head, but I don't.
Yeah, that's
week
gonna be
before
really
Thanksgiving.
good. That's a good way to start the year.
Really good way to start the year.
All right, Scott. So let's talk about some broken leadership. That's a good topic to start off with people thinking about maybe doing a pipeline in their church. Broken leadership methods, it can be holding back the church. I don't know that people give enough credit or blame to broken leadership when things just aren't going. If the church is not where you, as likely a high level leader, our listeners more so high level leaders, if the church just kind of has that feel like, what are we doing? How come we're not maybe more of what you envision the church to be? Maybe not enough blame on the leadership space, because I think the first scapegoat becomes programs and events and things like that. People are like, what can we do? What can we dream up? And sometimes those are good strategies for particular things. But the overarching thing that touches everything in the church is the leadership, the
Mhm.
quality of the leaders, the quantity of the leaders, and how well vision and mission gets projected down. And we talk about what really are we trying to achieve together, what's the best way to do it, how well are we doing at it, what needs to change. These are all leadership questions, Scott, and this is more so I think what our pastors and church leaders need to be looking at whenever it feels like the church has untapped potential.
Yeah. Yeah, I think we have broken leadership methods, which is sort of in the title of the of this article and of this podcast. We have broken leadership methods in the sense that we've been doing leadership the way that we learned it. You know, whenever you got into ministry, whether that was back in the 70s or 80s, or later in the 90s or 2000s, and the systems aren't working. And I think that, and if you can know that it's not working, if you're looking around and you don't have enough volunteers, the maybe you've got high staff turnover, maybe you have um, burning out. Maybe you're burning out volunteers, people who are just that used to volunteer a lot, don't volunteer very much anymore. All of these things would be evidences that your leadership methods themselves are broken. So I think that sometimes we think, I just need to do a better job pitching this or communicating this. And that's not really it. That might help on the margins, but that's not really the solution. The methods themselves, the structures themselves, the systems themselves are fundamentally broken. And I think that the what I want to get at today in this week's episode, and something that we teach in our leadership pipeline cohort, is that we don't need to reinvent leadership in terms of devising something new. We actually need to go back
Hmm.
to scripture and how does scripture teach us to organize leadership, and how to develop leaders, and how can we apply those biblical principles in our contemporary context. And that might sound like the most generic sounding thing in the world, but I promise you, like, give me a minute, and I'm going to show you how what we see in scripture is exactly what your church needs right now, and why what you're doing right now isn't working.
Yeah, it's amazing how that works out, that so many of the things that we can go back to find that are really effective, God planned out from the beginning, and plays out in scripture. And I don't know, I mean, I think that's just human nature. We've spent um, decades and centuries and millennia trying to improve upon things that God set in motion.
Yeah.
Always feeling like, I don't know, I think maybe I've got a fresh take on this. Is something new. And I
Mhm.
things do. I mean, the world we live in today is not the same that it was 2000 or 5,000 years ago. So yeah, there are new things, but sometimes the foundational things that we can go back to in God's word are the ones that can be the reset that we need, because these little incremental things over time, and just people talking into them and coming up with new ideas, things maybe even in the marketplace that have come into the church, that not that that can't ever it's never always bad and it's never always good. There can be things that we learn out of marketplace leadership that are effective, but sometimes we just incrementally over time, we just keep trying different, and then we just come to an end, or we're like, well, this isn't working. We have to come back to some biblical principles, that do work. They did
Mhm.
work. They've always worked. And
Right.
and we see this a lot in other areas of the church, Scott. I mean, resetting in our mission, in our vision, in how we disciple people, in the things that should be important and that we need to keep important. And this is one of them as well. Um, but it's not taught well. There's a lot of stuff out there, but it's not for many of our church leaders and pastors. Um, this wasn't necessarily just a natural part of curriculum. Maybe there was a class. Um, so anyway, that's what we like, being in the space, so we can help improve these things.
All right. So let me make my biblical case for what
All right.
leadership ought to look like. Okay. And I will make no apologies. I've spoken on this passage before on the podcast, and I'll speak about it again. But we need to go to Exodus 18. So if you're not driving somewhere, if you're sitting listening to this podcast in your office, you can open up your Bible or your app to Exodus 18, and let's see what's going on with Moses. So Moses is everything is coming up Moses at this point in the story. He thinks it's been hard, but he doesn't know hard yet, and everything's just kind of worked out. So he's reluctant to go to Egypt to set the people free, even though that's been his command. But he does go. There's the whole plagues thing that works out pretty great for the Israelites. They escape and they take some Egyptian treasure along with them. Oh no, here come the Egyptian army behind them. No problem. Just raise that staff up, man, and cross the Red Sea on dry land. No problem. Oh no, we're out of water. We find some water. Oh no, it's bitter. No problem. Stick that staff in. Boom, it's Evian. It's great. Oh no, we didn't plan so well. Now we're out of water again. No problem. Strike a rock with that staff. We got some water.
Bit of a problem.
Oh no, here comes.
Worked out for them.
Huh?
Bit of a problem. Worked out that day. Got some water.
Well, no, it was fine here. So it's later that he strikes the rock.
The other strike.
Yeah. So the first time God tells him to strike the rock. He strikes the rock. It's good. The later time, God tells him, speak to the rock. And Moses strikes the rock instead. Yeah. So some disobedience there. So anyway, so here now, we're getting attacked by the Amalekites. Oh no, we're slaves. We've never been an army before. And Moses just keeps his arms up with a couple of his buddies, hold his arms up, and then they win. They win their very first battle ever. So everything has worked out. There've been troubles, but things have worked out. And Moses has been the central focus point of all the leadership things. And so Jethro, who is Moses' father-in-law, I'll make no commentary on the fact that during all the stories I just listed out to you, Moses' wife and child are not with him. He has dropped them off. Prior to him going to Egypt, he drops off the wife and the kids with his father-in-law. And then he comes and meets him at this point and drops off the wife and the kids and says, take them back now. But Jethro also observes, he hears the stories and says, this is great. God is clearly looking out for you. But then he shadows Moses for just a day, and he watches how he is interacting with the people. And this is his observation. So if you go to verse 14, it says, when Moses' father-in-law saw all that Moses was doing for the people, he said, what is this that you are doing for the people? Why do you sit alone and all the people stand around you from morning till evening? So I think it's first worth noting here, if you read further up in the story, I didn't read all the verses here, Moses isn't actually fully alone. It talks about Moses and his elders, and obviously Moses has Aaron, Moses has Miriam, his sister. He has people around him who are supporting him. So I think that sometimes we read this passage and go, well, I'm already not alone. I've got an elder board, I've got a staff, or whatever. I've got volunteers. You think of the people. That's true for Moses too. Moses isn't fully alone, and yet he's functionally alone, and he's structurally alone. Moses is the bottleneck in the organization, even though he isn't the only person doing anything. So I think I just want to make this note. If in principle you are the bottleneck, then it doesn't matter that you have other people. You are functionally alone. So he says, why do you sit alone and all the people stand around you from morning till evening? Verse 15, he says, and Moses said to his father-in-law, I love this, because the people come to me to inquire of God. When they have a dispute, they come to me, and I decide between one person and another, and I make them know the statutes of God and his laws. This is so good. Moses, I think innocently, I don't think he's trying to be a narcissist or anything like that, but he has this view that he's the only one who can provide a good answer to a question. And I'm sorry if this offends you, but a lot of pastors feel this way. A lot of pastors feel like, hey, it stokes our ego to go, the people have a problem and they want me to come. We talked about this a couple of weeks ago on the podcast. Hey, when people are sick, they want me to come and pray for them. And I wish other people would be able to do it, but you know what? They want me. And there's a little bit of this, I think in reality, we feel this tension where we don't really want it. And then there's another part of us that's maybe a little egotistical, and we kind of like that everyone needs us, or this sense that people need us. And what's definitely happening in this story is Moses has this view that he is, and is in a very real sense, he is an ambassador on behalf of God. What's incorrect is that he views himself as the only possible ambassador for God. We see this mistake again made by Elijah, right? Elijah goes, he combats all the false priests, and then he goes off alone and he's depressed, and he goes up to this same mountain, and he goes to the mountain and he says, God, you should just kill everyone. It's just me. I'm alone. I'm the only one. And God's like, no, you're actually not. You're not the only one. And he makes him go down the mountain, and he makes him make a friend in Elisha. And so the same problem is being recreated here. We're seeing it first here. And Jethro says, what you're doing, this is verse 17, what you're doing is not good. You and the people with you will certainly wear yourselves out, for the thing is too heavy for you. You are not able to do it alone. And this is the same language. You are not able to do it alone. What you're doing is not good. This is echoes of Genesis language, where the Lord sees Adam alone and says, oh, this is not good. It is not good for man to be alone. And Jethro, who is, by the way, not an Israelite, he is a Moabite priest. He is standing, which Moses didn't think is possible. Jethro is standing in the place as an ambassador for God, speaking the wisdom of God to Moses and saying, what you're doing is not good. It's not good for you to lead alone. And to his credit, Moses listens to Jethro, and Jethro gives him this advice. Verse 21, look for able men from all the people, men who fear God, who are trustworthy and hate a bribe, and place such men over the people as chiefs of thousands, of hundreds, of fifties, and of tens. And so we have a couple of components here. We have defining the competencies for leadership. So Jethro says you have to be able to distinguish between leaders and non-leaders. Lots of times in our churches, we say we need leaders, but we don't know what a leader is. We just make it up in our own minds. We have a vision for what a leader is in our own minds, and yet people can't aspire to a standard that only exists in our head. It has to be an articulated, clear standard. This is what leadership looks like. And Jethro provides this in verse 21. Able men from all the people who fear God, trustworthy, and hate a bribe. And then he creates a structure for leadership. So place such men over the people as chiefs of thousands, of hundreds, of fifties, and tens. So we see 5 levels of leadership here. It's chiefs of tens, the fifties, hundreds, thousands, and then Moses and the elders at that 5th level of leadership. So we see a delineation of levels of leadership based on competency, based on capacity, and based on function. And so when you look at your leadership team, and you go, well, I've got a board and I have a staff. Maybe the staff is just you. And then I've got volunteers. That's just 3 levels. And so I would make the case that we haven't diversified our levels of leadership enough and clearly enough. We also have to combine that with those competencies. So how do we know? Are we actually elevating people? If you look around at your board, for example, and there are good guys, but they're not very effective, why is that? Is it possible that you have not set a clear standard for competency for leadership at that level, and we're just elevating people based on how long they've gone to our church or how
Mm,
much we like them,
mm.
rather than based on
We see
competency?
that a
So
lot. Yeah.
we see it a lot. So here's, and I know, I'm sorry, I've been talking for a long chunk, AJ, but this is my case. If you are looking at your church and the leadership is dysfunctional, my first question would be, are you the bottleneck? And are you needing to have an honest conversation in your own heart about your sense that you are more important than you actually are? And so you have allowed this to become the case where you have become the bottleneck. It's a structural problem, but also a heart problem. Number 1. Number 2, have you diversified your levels of leadership enough? Not just, I have a board, I've got some volunteers, I have a staff, but have we clearly outlined what 5 levels of leadership would look like in our church? And number 3, have we clearly created competencies for leadership that define what leadership looks like at each level, so we know what people can aspire to, so we know how we can develop them, which then leads to maybe the last thing, which is implied here but not explicit here, which is, how are we going to move people through those levels of leadership so that we actually have competent people at the top? And this, to me, is it's the structural biblical basis for a leadership pipeline, and it's what we teach in our process. And this is, I believe, a model that works. It worked for Moses, and it will work for you. So that is my that's my 10-minute sort of a breakdown of my biblical rationale for this.
Yeah, but it works. And you can see this in successful organizations, not just churches. I mean, these aren't like completely revolutionary principles. I mean, having qualified people at various levels, tasked with certain things, good lines of communication in between them, up and down, and training people well, evaluating their performance, setting benchmarks and goals. I mean, this is not rocket science, but it has fallen away out of most
Mm-hmm.
churches' structures. And the other thing is that there may be a lot of people listening that are like, my church isn't big enough to have that. I'm a solo pastor. I'm a bivocational pastor. I'm lucky that I've got 2 elders with me. And so, yeah, wow, I would love to be so big that I could have a structure like this. Now I know the answer
Yeah,
to this, Scott, but why don't you go ahead and speak to the scalability of the structure?
it's a great question. So it's gonna have to we're gonna have to adapt the structure to your size. So first of all, I would say if you're a church under 100, you're fine. I've done this process with a church that under 100. I've done it with more than one church of that size. We just adapt it. So some things that we might think of typically as staff functions, we're going to approach still from a volunteer perspective. Um, and I don't need to get into the weeds on all this, but we have a way of doing this. What we want to do is we want to set up the structure for growth. Then
Yeah.
go, all right, we want to put the levels in place, and then as we grow, we will continue to adapt the structure. But the structure is there, and we grow into the structure rather than not having it to begin with. But I'm totally there. We don't want to. I use this example in the teaching. My son he's 11 now. He's going to be tall. He's tall for his age, and he'll be taller than me, I know, which means he'll have a bigger foot than me. But right now, my foot's still bigger than his, and if I put him around walking around in a pair of my shoes, he's going to be tripping over himself. And so we do want to scale the structure so that it's structured for growth, but not that it's structured for who you think you'll be 10 years from now.
Mm-hmm.
So it needs to be realistic, but the principles translate and we adapt them to the size that you are. So yes, if you're listening to this and going, well, this would never work for my church because I'm a church of 50, that's not true. We adapt the principles. We use the principles fully and we adapt the structure to the size that you are so that it works.
Yeah, absolutely. Understanding the concepts and having a few of the pieces in place when you're smaller is one of those elements that's going to set you up for to manage growth, and to even in some cases I think accelerate growth because you already know like what do we need to be doing next, instead of
Yeah,
being behind.
if you think it's hard now to insert these principles, trust me, it's much harder to put them in later when your church has grown.
Yeah.
So put them in now when it's kind of easy and you've got sort of a simplified pipeline structure. Um, do it now and then you grow into it versus growing and then having to go back and put the structure into it. So that it's always a little bit silly when I hear that and go, oh, we couldn't possibly do it. Yeah, no, we can apply the principles and we can expand the structure as we grow.
Hmm.
It's way harder to go back and put the structure in.
Yeah, absolutely. All right. Well, so Scott, you want to talk about some of the steps that people could get into to shift from
Yes. So,
broken to biblically based leadership?
right. So first thing is we have to, what I've already kind of tackled, but I want to reiterate, which is as we communicate this to our congregation, we want to communicate that this is a biblical approach to leadership. This is important to folks. And I think one of the biggest pieces of feedback that I get when we take churches through this process is an appreciation for our commitment to Scripture, and going, all right, everything that we say we're going to do, we're deriving from the Word of God and not just from our own rear ends. If it just comes from Scott Ball's brain or from some other book that I got off a shelf, it's not going to work. So reiterating that and communicating that is really important. The second thing is we have to do the hard work of start recognizing and promoting potential leaders.
Hmm.
We talked about this a couple weeks ago on the podcast, but this concept that we have to start placing people in leadership positions. Well, hold on, I want to stop. I want to be sure that I'm clear on this because there's two sides to this coin. One, we have to be willing to place people in leadership positions and elevate them into leadership positions before we feel totally comfortable releasing authority to people. Like Jesus is sending out the 12 and he's sending out the 72. He's sending them out. One of those guys is going to betray him, and yet he sends them out anyway to do a ministry of preaching and casting out demons and healing and all of these things. You forget this, but Judas was given power too. And he was given authority too, and he abused it, and there were consequences for that. But we need to remember that we're not greater than Jesus. And so if Jesus is willing to share authority with people who don't deserve it, we also need to be willing to do that. The flip side of that is we don't want to elevate people to a level of their incompetence and kind of elevate them before they're ready. So we hold these things in tension. We don't want to wait forever to elevate people and give them authority, but we also don't want to kind of set them up for failure, putting them in a position when we know they're not going to succeed.
Mm.
And so the step to implementing this is at some point you're going to have to start asking people to step into roles, even though you're not 100% sure that it's going to work out. And that can be scary for pastors.
Yeah, but yeah, you're absolutely right, because it's the safe thing is to keep doing it yourself, because it's predictable, and you know it's going to get done. So it is a step of faith to put that trust into somebody else, if you're not quite sure they're ready or not. And you know what? They probably aren't, because they've not been doing it as long as you. They might not have been doing it at all, or they've only seen what you've allowed them to see. So yeah, you think you need to recognize the fact that it's going to be a little bit different. Something might get messed up, but it's an investment in your time to coach and correct and train up, um, because you know what, they might turn out to be somebody that is capable of doing it better than you even. And again, you need to check your heart on that, and
Mhm.
make sure that doesn't affect how you relate to them or others. But yeah, I mean, it's a wise investment, to be able to divide that load and put people in place that might have some new ideas and different skill sets that'll take it to a whole new level.
Yeah. The next thing I will say, if you want to move from kind of this broken system to the pipeline structure, is I really would encourage you to seek some external guidance and resources. And I'm fully aware that this is going to sound self promotion, and to some degree it is. Um, you are totally welcome to go to Amazon.com and buy a boatload of books that will teach you how to build a leadership pipeline in your church. There's lots of good resources that you can track down and find. You can read articles like the ones we have, like this one, and listen to podcasts and put your own process together. You are capable and you are smart and you can do this. It will take you a long time, and you won't know the potholes. And so it's why we're putting things like the cohort together. That's an inexpensive option, because time's of the essence. And I know you got a lot of stuff on your plate. So if in 6 weeks we could help you put together a leadership pipeline, like why wouldn't you want to do that? And I'm again, it is a little bit self-promotion-y, but if you didn't want to work with us, work with someone else. Find someone who can help you, who's been down this road, and use their expertise. I always will remind you that Paul got his start in ministry not originally as a church planter, but as a church consultant. Do you remember this? Paul's living his best life back home, and Antioch calls him. He's in Tarsus, and the church in Antioch's having some problems, and they go, you know who we ought to call that Paul guy. You remember him? And they call him and they bring him in, and it's from there then they get sent and begin their ministry of church planting. But bringing in people to help you is not an unbiblical thing. It's like the whole reason that the New Testament exists. So
Mm.
um, I would encourage you to lean on, um, not wouldn't if you don't want to work with me, I'm not offended, but find someone who has helped churches build this out and lean on their wisdom so you can get there faster. So if you are part of a Baptist association, you have an opportunity to do a cohort thing through them, do that. If you want to use our process, use our process. But um, I cannot tell you how invaluable it is. And the churches that I work with will tell you we wouldn't have gotten to this point if we hadn't had some help, because we didn't know what we didn't know. And so I would encourage you to use some outside resources to help you build a leadership pipeline if this really is a paradigm shift for your church.
Yeah. Yeah, for sure. There's just so much wisdom out there, in the church, in the body of Christ. I mean, we can get myopic sometimes, like, well, my church is my church, and we've got what we need. We'll do this on our own. Yeah, I mean, remember, you're a part of the global church.
Mm-hmm.
There's congregations worldwide, and people and leaders and pastors and consultants and all kinds of people that make up, the body of Christ worldwide. And when we function together. So yeah, don't feel like you have to do this on your own or demand that you do this on your own. Look around a little bit.
Mm-hmm.
It is, you mentioned, Scott, it's a shorter way to get to a positive end. So
Mm-hmm.
time's a ticking. We've there's a mission to accomplish, that we've all been called to, and why are we waiting? Why would we wait?
I think there are two main reasons. One, well, maybe I can think of the third one. So one would be there is an issue where a lot of us feel in ministry like if I don't do it myself, then it doesn't count. And I think it's kind of an American perspective for sure. But maybe we think we get an extra jewel in our crown in heaven if we pulled ourselves up by our own bootstraps and didn't ask for any help. And I think that that's just silly. Like, we've got to put that aside. Two, I think that there's an assumption that, when we get help from someone, and again, this isn't aimed just at us, and this is true anybody who's in this space who helps churches, there's an assumption that they're going to come in and they're going to there's going to be no consideration for our unique context or our unique situation.
Mm-hmm.
And I can't speak for other people, but I can tell you from my own, I was just on a phone call yesterday with a church that I went through Pipeline with, and was speaking to one of the elders, and he said, "Hey, we're wanting to make this adjustment in how we talk about assessment, and I want to do it this way. Can we do that?" And I was like, "Yeah, yeah, obviously. I mean, it's totally in spirit with and in step with what we teach, and it's an adjustment that makes sense." And I gave a couple warnings. I said, "Now make sure that XYZ doesn't happen. You need to, counterbalance it with this." But obviously, that's an adjustment that makes sense. So I think there's an assumption that it's a rigid outcome design, and that's not the case. And then I think the third thing is just practical. Like, well, our church can't afford it. That wouldn't it be great?
Mm-hmm.
On that note, I would just say, if you're a church outside the United States and you're listening to this, we have training resources, including on Leadership Pipeline, that are available to you at no cost to you because it's supported by donors. So you can email us and ask about that. Go to leadership@malphursgroup.com. Ask how you can get access to that stuff. We'll let you know. But if you're a church here in North America, it's why we're putting things like the cohort together. It's probably something that you could make a decision on your own without having to take it through your finance team. We're intentionally trying to get these resources out and processes out at affordable rates, because we're nonprofit. We're not trying to make no one's trying to get rich. We're trying to serve as many churches as possible.
Yep. All right, and then our last thing on some other steps that can be taken is encouraging feedback with your teams. So this is something that doesn't always come naturally in the church either. Is this kind of clear two-way communication streams? But that's it's one of the benefits of having the structure in place, is that there's built-in areas that are allowing this to take place. In which people at the various levels within the structure are able to speak freely about what is the true lived experience in my area of ministry. How does this line up with what we're trying to do together as a church? How do we need to make adjustments and change things? Like that church came back to you, Scott, but that didn't happen in isolation from that one individual. It was feedback from another component within the structure. That I'm just saying that I'm assuming it's true, and it probably is. You can nod in agreement. Yeah. I mean, it was part of what the structure allows, and that's feedback and ideas to be able to come both directions, up and down line within a leadership structure and a team. So, but this doesn't happen naturally in a lot of churches. There's, whenever we're just kind of organically like, okay, you have time to do that? Great. You do that. Can I get you to do this? I know it's your day job, but we really need that. Somebody to kind of do that over here too. There's no communication happening in those spaces like that. Whenever people we just needed somebody and they said they would do it.
People are getting voluntold. Yeah.
Yeah, right. Actually that is the setup in which there would be even less, because they feel like I'm just helping out. It's a very they and us, they and me. They needed something done. I'll just go ahead and do it. That's not an environment in which people bring ideas and suggestions, whether they even feel comfortable doing that or whether they are then even received well. When we put together a structure and we have teams in place and people are encouraged to find their right place, and then also encouraged, you're basically telling somebody, you are great at this. We would love to hear your ideas. I mean, that's the nature of the environment. Then it raises everything up. So Yeah, if that's been a pain point for you as well, like I feel like we don't communicate well. I don't think these people really understand what it is, I feel like our vision is or what we're trying to get out of this ministry. That might be true. They may not understand. And so
Yeah.
that's just one of the other many benefits of having a pipeline structure in place is this clear lines of communication and two-way communication.
Hmm. Yeah, absolutely. So, if you're thinking about, just so I can reiterate, I mentioned this as I was going through Exodus 18, but I want to reiterate. When we talk about a leadership pipeline, we're talking about three things in particular. One, a clear structure for leadership that's probably more broken out than your current structure is. Two, clear competencies for leadership. So, how do we know a leader from a non leader, and what does that leadership look like at the various levels of leadership that we've defined? And three, a leadership development process so that we have a clear way of moving people from one level to another if they aspire to higher levels of leadership, which not everyone does. But even if they don't, how can I still improve the quality of their leadership where they're at? So that I get the best from them and that they get the best from themselves and they feel the most sense of satisfaction. And this is an approach to leadership that is not revolutionary, but it is different from what you're doing right now in 999 out of 1,000 churches that I encounter. And so when you make this transition, as AJ was talking about, it's going to require a lot of communication and feedback. So one sort of niche piece of advice I'll give, and it's something we teach in our pipeline process, is as you begin to roll this out, roll it out first with some of your most difficult people. In strategic envisioning, we actually do our best to kind of loop around, do an end around the difficult people. But in this process, this is one where you actually want to engage with your most difficult people first, bring them in. And as you're implementing new structures and processes, get their feedback early on. Because even though those might be difficult conversations, one, you are neutralizing a lot of their complaints by asking for them to give active feedback in the early stages. And two, you are getting a sneak preview at what the critics are going to say that you haven't engaged early on, so that you can proactively begin to neutralize some of those arguments. And three, you're going to find holes that you didn't find in your planning. So everything always looks good on paper when you map it out and you put it on a whiteboard, and it seems like it's going to work out wonderfully. And then there's someone who's going to find the hole in that plan, and you want to invite those people to find those holes early so that you can address them and make adjustments. So I feel like, literally I could talk for hours about leadership pipeline and how to build one, which is why you should join the cohort so I can help you. But I think that's maybe enough. We'll leave it at that. We just want to give you a vision for a new way, a different way of doing leadership that is not, it's not new in the sense that it's not recently invented. It's a new way for your church that has its roots in Exodus 18. And so we want to invite you to take this step, to make this shift. Whether you do it with us through the cohort or on your own, this will revolutionize your church.
Yeah, absolutely. What's that web address again to register for the cohort?
malphursgroup.com/pipeline-cohort. But it will be in the description. And if you just go to our article for today, malphursgroup.com/214, there'll be links in there to the cohort also. And you can sign up right now and get 10% discount until I think it's November 19th. It's the week before Thanksgiving is when the early bird stuff runs out.
Okay. So if you're listening to this later than mid-November or so, you may have missed that deal, but hopefully you were in early and were able to get in on that. While you're over there, you can also click on that donate button because, as Scott mentioned, we're a nonprofit ministry. And for those of you that do sign up for the cohort, you can also know that a portion of the fee that comes into that goes to help churches around the world, which is what the other donors and partners contribute to, that have decided to make generous contributions to our ministry to allow us to take this and other services around the world to train up leaders.
That's right. We're like We're like the Tom's shoes of church consulting.
There you go. Yep. Yep.
Buy a pair, give a pair.
That's right. That's how that works. But we would love to talk with you about a partnership at your church also as a ministry partner to help carry the mission around the world. Thanks for being with us, everybody. We'll see you again next week.